My name is David Reynolds. For as long as my memory serves, my purpose in this life has been singular and unwavering: to serve God and carry His message of transformative love to every soul I could reach. For decades, I lived the life of a traveler, moving between towns near and far, preaching the gospel, tending to the broken, and doing my level best to walk the path Jesus laid out for us. But absolutely nothing in my years of ministry could have prepared me for the reality of the night my heart simply ceased to beat. It was a typical Sunday evening, and I had just walked away from a powerful, spirit-filled service at a small country church on the outskirts of town. The congregation had been truly alive that day, singing, praying, and worshiping with a fervor that suggested they believed every single syllable they uttered. It left me feeling spiritually energized, the kind of feeling that makes you believe you've actually done something meaningful for the kingdom. I climbed into my car for the quiet drive home, my mind drifting back to the message I had shared that morning. Love one another as I have loved you. The road stretched out ahead of me, a dark ribbon illuminated only by the steady glow of my headlights. The night air was crisp and cool, the kind of refreshing breeze that makes you want to roll the windows down just an inch or two to feel it brush against your face. I reached over and flicked on the radio, and a familiar old gospel song began to play, one I hadn't heard since I was a small boy in Sunday school. I found myself smiling at the nostalgia, and then, without warning, it happened. At first, it was just a strange tightness in the center of my chest, a dull, nagging ache as if someone were pressing their thumb firmly against my heart. I tried to shift in my seat, thinking I could just shake it off, but within seconds, the pain sharpened into something jagged and terrifying, radiating down my left arm like an electric shock. My breath became shallow and panicked, and my vision began to cloud at the edges. A wave of vertigo hit me so violently that I had to white-knuckle the steering wheel just to stay upright. I knew exactly what was unfolding: a heart attack. Panic flared in my throat, but I forced it down. "Stay calm, David. Just get to the shoulder." I tried to steer the car to the side of the road, but my fingers had turned to lead and wouldn't cooperate. My legs felt hollow, and my entire body grew heavier by the second. My heart gave one final, wild pound against my ribs, and then it simply stopped. The world around me faded into a sudden, absolute silence. My hand slipped from the wheel, my foot went limp on the gas pedal, and before I could even process the magnitude of the moment, I was swallowed by darkness. I have no memory of my car swerving off the asphalt. I don't remember if I hit an embankment or if the metal crumpled. None of that registered. All I knew was that I was suddenly, inexplicably, no longer inside my body. At first, there was only a quiet, detached confusion. Was this the end? Was this death? I looked down and saw my own body slumped over in the driver's seat. My car had rolled into a shallow, grassy ditch, coming to a rest against the rough bark of a tree. The engine was still humming with a soft, mechanical vibration, and the radio was still playing that same old gospel hymn. But I wasn't in there anymore. I was hovering above the scene, watching it all unfold like a silent movie. The strangest part was the lack of fear. There was no pain, no lingering panic, no desperate struggle to get back. There was only peace, a peace so profound and all-consuming that I had never experienced anything like it, not even in my deepest moments of prayer. It felt as though every weight, every worry, and every regret of my life had been lifted. And then, before I could even comprehend this new state of being, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, and that's when I saw it. A light, pure, warm, and impossibly bright, began pulling me in. It wasn't like the sun or any artificial light on earth. This light had a living depth, as if it were breathing. It radiated a love that filled me with total safety. It wasn't just a destination, it was Him. I knew I was about to meet Jesus. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the car or on that dark road. I was in a place of light that stretched beyond the horizons of my mind, surrounding me like a gentle, holy embrace. I felt a love that made every earthly bond feel like a shadow. I was standing before the one I had spent my life preaching about. My knees buckled, and I hit the ground, not because I was forced, but because in the presence of Jesus, worship is the only thing that makes sense. His presence was utterly overwhelming, yet it wasn't a weight that crushed me. Rather, it was a realization that every fiber of my being finally recognized its creator. I was standing before the absolute source, the origin of everything good, everything true, and everything holy in the universe. He looked at me, and in that eternal moment, I experienced something I had never felt in all my years of ministry: total, unfiltered understanding. He saw me completely, peering past the imam's robes and the preacher's reputation. He saw every mistake I had ever made, every private doubt that had flickered in the dark, and every failure I had tried to pray away. He saw the moments I had preached about a love I was secretly struggling to feel myself. He saw it all, every blemish on my soul, yet his eyes held not a single shred of judgment. Instead, they were deep wells of endless, transformative compassion. "David," he said, and his voice wasn't a sound that hit my ears. It was a presence. It was a vibration that resonated inside my very marrow, filling every empty space within me. "You are not supposed to come yet, but there is something you must see." I tried to open my mouth to respond, but no words would form. What could a man possibly say to the Word himself? I didn't ask why I was there. I didn't ask if I was dreaming or if my heart had truly stopped for good. In the sheer magnitude of his presence, those questions were trivial, almost non-existent. All that mattered was him. He extended his hand toward me, a simple and profound gesture, and without a second of hesitation, I reached out. The very instant my hand touched his, the fabric of the world around us began to shift and tear away. The light stretched and expanded until the environment was moving, not like walking or flying, but as if we were passing through a dimension far greater than the concepts of space or time. I had no idea where we were headed, but with Jesus leading me, I knew that wherever he was taking me, it was somewhere my soul was desperate to see. As we traveled, the light around us continued to bloom until everything I knew was replaced by something entirely new. Even calling it a place feels like a disservice to the reality of it. It was beyond any description I could possibly find in a dictionary. The first thing that struck me was the air. It wasn't just a gas we breathe. It was life in its purest form. Every breath I drew felt like it was filling me with something infinitely greater than oxygen. It was rich, vibrant, and almost electric, as if the very act of inhaling carried the frequency of pure joy. I could feel it moving through my spirit, making me feel lighter, more resilient, and finally completely whole. The warmth of this realm wasn't like the heat of a summer sun. It was a deeper, internal glow, like being wrapped in the safest and most comforting embrace a child could ever know. Then in the distance I saw it. A city emerged, but it wasn't a city of bricks, mortar, or cold steel. It wasn't crowded, loud, or confined by walls. The buildings shimmered, appearing to be constructed out of light itself, rising into a sky that stretched further than my mind could comprehend. Every single surface glowed from within, fueled by the essence of God's presence woven into the very foundations. As we moved closer, I saw the people. They weren't strangers, even though I didn't know their names. It was like seeing family members you had never been introduced to but had somehow known your entire life. They were radiant, possessing a wholeness and a peace that I had never seen on a human face before. On the faces of those I saw in that celestial city, there were no furrowed brows, no lines of stress, and no shadows of exhaustion. There was only pure, unfiltered happiness radiating from within. They laughed with a lightness I'd never heard. They embraced with a sincerity that brought a physical ache to my heart, and they spoke to one another with a profound warmth. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't the superficial politeness we often settle for on earth. It was real love, a soul-level connection that required no effort. There was no trace of bitterness, no flickering of jealousy, and no memory of pain. I stood in awe as I watched people who likely would have been bitter enemies on earth stand side by side, completely united. They weren't bound by the trivialities of nationality, the labels of race, or even the differences in their earthly beliefs. They were held together by something much greater, a bond of a kind I had never witnessed before. Seeing my wonder, Jesus turned to me. His face was a picture of calm, his voice steady and resonant. "This is what was intended," he said. At those words, I felt a surge of emotion so strong I wanted to cry, not out of a sense of sadness, but out of a devastating knowing. I realized that this was the world as it was always meant to be. This was the original design. A reality with no borders to defend, no conflicts to resolve, no greed to satisfy, and no hatred to harbor. Just love. An unshakable, unbreakable, eternal love. I didn't need to ask him why we had lost this on earth. The answer was written in the history of my own heart. We had built our own walls, drawn our own arbitrary lines, and manufactured divisions that were never intended to exist in God's kingdom. We had collectively chosen the hollow rewards of selfishness, the poison of pride, and the fleeting rush of power over the simple, beautiful mandate of love. Seeing the staggering glory of what could have been made my spirit ache with regret. But then the expression on Jesus' face shifted. His eyes, though still overflowing with love, grew intensely serious. His gentle features took on a weight, something I can only describe as a divine sorrow. "There is something else you must see," he said. Suddenly, the brilliant light around us began to churn and shift once more. The laughter and the warmth of heaven started to dissolve, fading away like a dream at daybreak. The beauty of the intended design disappeared before my eyes, and I felt myself being pulled away toward a very different, very grim reality. A part of me wanted to fight it, to stay in that perfect place where peace ruled. But I trusted my guide. I knew that whatever he was about to show me, however painful, I needed to see it. The brightness of heaven vanished, and before I could even process the transition, the world shifted beneath me. The warmth and peace were still a part of me, but they now felt distant, like a precious memory slipping through my fingers. I wasn't afraid, because Jesus was still right beside me, but a deep, unexplainable sorrow began to settle in my chest. In a heartbeat, we were descending, not falling through the air, but moving with a heavy pressure against my spirit. The light of heaven dimmed into a murky twilight, and soon I saw the earth, but not the earth I had known. This wasn't a world of trees and rivers. It was a revelation of the true condition of humanity. Images began to flash before my eyes with a painful, exploding clarity. I saw war, cities reduced to smoldering rubble, the screams of the innocent echoing through the ruins as families were torn apart. I saw men with hatred in their eyes striking down strangers for the sake of an ideology. I saw children wandering through streets littered with the fallen, their faces masked in soot and tears. Entire nations were locked in combat over land and power, never realizing that none of it would matter in the end. I saw the horror of hunger, people in mansions surrounded by excess while just beyond their gates, others starved, their bodies frail and their eyes hollow with a desperation that went unheard. I saw the greed of corporations thriving while the workers struggled just to breathe. I saw entire systems designed specifically to enrich the elite at the staggering cost of the vulnerable many. I watched leaders who had taken sacred oaths to protect their people instead lining their own pockets, turning a cold, calculated blind eye to the tidal wave of suffering beneath them. Families were being pulverized. I saw husbands and wives who had once stood before the Almighty promising eternal devotion, now turning their backs on one another in a flurry of spite. Children were caught in the jagged crossfire of bitterness and lifelong resentment. I saw brothers who refused to speak, and sisters separated by ancient grudges that had long outlived any logical reason for existing. And then came the worst of it. The church, my church, the very body of Christ. I saw believers tearing at one another, fighting not over righteousness or the pursuit of holiness, but over the hollow demands of pride. Denominations were hopelessly divided. Christians were spending their lives judging one another, choosing the heavy chains of legalism over the freedom of love. Some were standing behind pulpits preaching forgiveness while privately refusing to offer it to their own kin. Others spoke eloquently of grace while silently condemning anyone they deemed unworthy of the pews. I saw people walking past the shivering homeless with leather-bound Bibles clutched in their hands, ignoring the very least of these that Jesus had explicitly commanded us to cherish. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to squeeze my eyes shut to unsee the horror I was being shown, but I was held fast. I had spent my entire life preaching and calling others to the faith, but in this light I had to ask, had I truly understood? Had I lived the way Jesus intended? "This is not what I taught," Jesus said, his voice thick with an oceanic sorrow. I turned to him, and for the first time I saw an actual flash of pain in his eyes. It wasn't the heat of anger or the sting of disappointment. It was a deep, aching grief. He wasn't looking at them as an outsider judging their transgressions. He was looking at his own children, his beloved creation, and watching them systematically destroy themselves. I felt the collective weight of it all pressing against my spirit. The wars, the insatiable greed, the jagged divisions. It wasn't just a movie I was watching. I felt it as a physical sensation. I felt the hollow pain of every orphan, the cries of the forgotten, and the terrifying emptiness of those who had accumulated everything on earth, yet possessed nothing of value in eternity. It settled into my soul like a leaden stone, suffocating me, yet I knew this was only the beginning. Jesus turned his steady gaze toward me. "You must understand why things are this way," he said, "and why it cannot remain this way much longer." His words sent a primal shiver through my being. I didn't know the specifics of what he meant, but I knew something momentous was coming, and the world was utterly unprepared. The vision sharpened. Jesus allowed me to see the root of the sickness. I watched scene after scene of people who claimed the name of God while their hearts were calcified with anger and judgment. They sat in sanctuaries, raising their hands in polished worship, yet when faced with someone struggling or lost, they turned away in disgust. I saw a man on his knees, crying out for a second chance, but instead of an embrace, he was shunned by the righteous. They judged him for his past rather than seeing his potential in God's eyes. I saw Christians pointing fingers, arguing over traditions that had nothing to do with the heart of the Father. They held on to pride, believing their specific way was the only way. And then I saw myself. Jesus showed me my own life, the times I preached love but failed to show it, the times I judged others without even realizing it, or turned away from someone in need because I was too busy with God's work. It crushed me. I had served my whole life, but had I loved first? Jesus' voice broke through the ruins of my ego. "They have forgotten my greatest commandment." I knew then. It was never about the rules or the religion. It was just love, a love that acts, a love that forgives. I turned to him, my heart breaking. "Lord," I whispered, "what do I do?" He looked directly into my soul, and his expression was a haunting mixture of profound sorrow and piercing urgency. "You must go back, David. You must go back and tell them what you have seen." The words hit me with the force of a tidal wave, knocking the breath from my spirit. "Go back," I stammered, my voice trembling in the celestial air. "Lord, is that even possible? My heart has stopped. I've already crossed the threshold of death." Jesus simply looked at me with a steady, knowing gaze. In that silence, the truth settled over me. This was not my final exit. My time on earth was not yet finished, but I understood with terrifying clarity that if I returned, the man I used to be could not go with me. I had to carry back the truth. I had to tell the world that God is never found in the walls of division or the heat of religious argument, but in the simplicity of love. I had to proclaim that Jesus wasn't calling us to win debates about theology, but to manifest mercy to the broken. Faith wasn't about the performance of looking righteous. It was about the grueling work of actually living righteously, by loving the unlovable, by forgiving the unforgivable, and by being a living reflection of Christ to a world that had forgotten his face. I had spent 40 years in the pulpit, but in this moment, I finally understood the message I had been trying to preach. Jesus had one final thing to reveal before my spirit was sent back, and I knew it would be the anchor for the rest of my life. I felt the immense weight of his words settling deep within me, replacing my confusion with a singular, sharp focus. Love was not a mere suggestion or a nice sentiment to put on a postcard. It was the very fabric holding the universe together, the only force in existence capable of shattering the chains of pain, division, and suffering that were devouring humanity. As I stood there, absorbing this revelation, Jesus raised his hand, and the vision shifted once more. I didn't see the macro-level horrors of war or hunger this time. I saw individuals. I saw faces etched with struggles and burdens they carried like invisible blocks of lead on their shoulders. I realized these were the people society had labeled as expendable. I saw a man alone in a darkened room, surrounded by empty bottles. His hands shook with a violent tremor as he reached for another drink, desperate to drown out the screaming in his mind. I could feel his self-loathing, the way he despised the man in the mirror. He wanted to stop, but the world had already branded him a lost cause. People passed him on the street with a shake of their heads. They judged him and dismissed him, but no one truly saw the man inside. No one reached out with the love that cost something. Jesus' voice was calm but firm in my ear. Love him. The vision moved again. I saw a young girl huddled on the floor of a cold shelter, her knees pulled tight to her chest. She had escaped a home defined by abuse and terror, but now she had nowhere to turn. Society had written her off as another statistic, assuming the worst about her background without ever bothering to ask her for her story. No one stopped to offer her the safety of love. Love her, Jesus said. Then I saw a man who had inflicted deep wounds on others. He had been cruel, manipulative, and selfish. The world rightfully despised him and people wanted nothing to do with him. Jesus turned to me. Forgive him and love him. I shook my head in disbelief. But Lord, how? How do we love those who have done so much damage? Jesus looked at me with such spiritual depth that it pierced my very soul. In that instant, I saw my own reflection in his eyes. I realized the truth. The same love that could save the broken and the lost was the very love that had been sustaining me. How many times had I failed? How many times had I let my own pride or fear cloud my heart? And yet, Jesus had never withheld his love from me. Not once. The vision expanded with a staggering clarity, and I saw a glimpse of what the world could truly become. I saw people making the conscious, difficult choice to love first instead of reaching for the easy weapon of condemnation. I saw families reuniting, not because their pasts had been magically perfected, but because they had finally chosen the grueling, beautiful work of forgiveness. I saw people reaching out to the homeless, the addicted, and the forgotten. They weren't moving with a hollow sense of pity, but with a true, honest, and sacrificial love. I saw churches finally coming together, not to litigate old arguments or sharpen the lines of division, but to serve. The world wasn't a perfect paradise, but it was healing. It was breathing again, and all of it was happening because love was finally being translated into action. Jesus' voice broke through the beauty of the vision. But they must choose it, David, and they are running out of time. The peace in his voice remained, but it was now underscored by a terrifying urgency. I turned to him, my spirit trembling. What do you mean? He didn't answer with a sentence. Instead, he let me feel the pressure. It was a heavy tectonic shift, as if the entire world was standing at the edge of a great crossroads. One path led to redemption and light. The other led to a darkness I couldn't even describe. The choice had to be made in the now. If they do not change, the world will suffer greatly, he warned. It wasn't a threat of punishment, but a sober observation of the path we were on. Love was the only emergency exit left. I knew then that I had to go back. I had to tell them, but I realized that words alone, the sermons I had preached for 40 years, would never be enough. They needed to see love in action. I looked at Jesus and said, I will go back. I will tell them. He nodded, and as his hand moved toward me, I felt the gravity of earth beginning to pull at my soul. I was being drawn away from the light. I looked at him, my heart breaking. How could I walk away from this overwhelming peace? I had never felt more alive than I did standing in his presence. The weight of the world was gone, and for the first time, I knew what it meant to be whole. You will not remember everything at once, he said gently, but in time it will return. Before I could ask what I would lose, an undeniable force began to pull me backward through space and time. My heart cried out, "Lord, please don't send me back, not yet." But his eyes told me the time was up. The light twisted and faded, and then pain. A crushing, heavy sensation slammed into my chest. My lungs burned as I dragged in thick, foreign air. I was back. I heard the frantic voices of paramedics. "He's breathing. How is that possible?" one shouted. I was weak and cold, but as the dizziness faded, my memory remained intact. I remembered Jesus. I remembered the warning. I ignored the protests of the medical team and struggled to sit up. My heart was pounding, but I had a mission. In the hospital bed, I stared at my hands, feeling the terrifying weight of being alive again. Everything was different because I had finally been awakened. I had died. I had stood in the shimmering, holy presence of Jesus Christ. I had seen the architecture of heaven, and now I was back in a world that no longer felt like home. The doctors at the hospital spoke in hushed, clinical tones, calling my survival a miracle. They couldn't begin to comprehend how I had survived a massive, catastrophic heart attack, or why my brain and body showed absolutely no lasting damage. They threw around terms like medical anomalies and spoke about the rare individuals who somehow defy the odds of science. But I knew the truth with a clarity that surpassed their charts. I hadn't been saved by the advancements of medicine, by a stroke of luck, or by the quick reflexes of the paramedics. I had been sent back. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, I replayed Jesus' words over and over. "You must go back and tell them." The sheer urgency in his voice still vibrated in my soul. I couldn't afford to waste a single second. The very day I was discharged, I gathered my family together. My wife sat on the edge of the couch, clutching my hand so tightly it was as if she were afraid I might vanish into thin air if she let go. My children, now grown with lives of their own, looked at me with a heavy mix of relief and deep-seated concern. They were expecting a talk about my health, how I would slow down, rest, and finally take care of myself. But that wasn't why I had called the meeting. I told them everything. I shared every detail of the car, the light, the vision, and every word Jesus had spoken. I spoke of the world's hidden pain, the love we had discarded, and the choice we were all facing. I told them love is the only answer and that time is rapidly running out. They listened in a deafening silence. My wife's tears were silent. My oldest son looked away, struggling to process the supernatural, but my youngest simply shook his head. "Dad, I don't know," he said, his voice cautious. "You were dead. Your brain had no oxygen for minutes. Maybe it was just a hallucination." I wasn't angry or even surprised. It's one thing to hear a story of heaven from a stranger, but quite another when it comes from your own father. I told them I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I could see my words touching something deep inside him, even if he wasn't ready to admit it. But my mission couldn't stop at my front door. I had a congregation that had followed me for decades. The following Sunday, I stood before them, the familiar faces of people I had baptized, married, and buried. This wasn't a sermon. It was a report from the front lines of eternity. I told them I had seen heaven and heard an urgent warning from Jesus. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. Then a woman in the front row stood up, her face wet with tears. "Pastor, I believe you. I've been living wrong." One by one, others stood. Confessions poured out. People who hadn't spoken in years were suddenly embracing and reconciling in the aisles. It wasn't about me. It was the message. In the weeks that followed, I saw more transformation than in all my years of ministry combined. Grudges vanished. The church united to serve rather than debate. Yet deep in my heart, I knew the work was just beginning. This message was for everyone, and I had to find a way to reach them before the sun set. The memory of his presence remained as real as the ground beneath my feet, and the urgency of his warning pressed on my soul. I had thought this was for my church alone, but I was realizing the scope was far greater. The transformation I witnessed was not some psychological trick or temporary emotion. It was real, undeniable change in the very fabric of people's lives. I saw families that had been shattered for decades by the twin poisons of pride and unforgiveness finally collapsing into each other's arms. I saw grudges that had been held like weapons for years being dropped in the dust. Hearts that had turned to stone were softening before my eyes. People were finally beginning to see one another through the lens of divine love, rather than the distorted glass of judgment. But as I walked this path, I also encountered the resistance. There were those who flatly refused to hear a single word. They dismissed my experience as a hallucination, a neurological glitch, or a desperate mental attempt to cling to faith after my heart had failed. There were those who would nod politely, claiming they were moved by the story, yet they continued to live exactly as they had before, unchanged and unbothered. And then there were those who didn't just doubt me, they rejected the message with a visceral hostility, as if the very suggestion that love could save the world was an offensive assault on their reality. That was when the truth hit me. This message wasn't just for the believers. It wasn't just for the people who already filled the pews on Sunday mornings and recited the verses at night. It was for every human being on this planet. Love is not a religious decoration or a nice sentiment from Scripture. It is the fundamental force that holds the universe together. It is the only key to healing, the only answer to the struggle, and the only power that can truly flip the switch in the human heart. Jesus didn't show me heaven just so I could come back with a comforting bedtime story. He didn't send me back to reassure people that the afterlife was pleasant. He gave me a warning, a plea, and a final chance for humanity to see the truth before the door shuts. The world is at a crossroads, and I feel the tension growing in my bones every day. The division and anger have seeped into every crevice of our society, growing stronger and more infectious. I see people turning against one another in ways that defy logic, not just in politics, but in the quiet of their own homes. Hate is no longer a shadow. It is a wildfire being encouraged and justified. Jesus told me, if they do not change, the world will suffer greatly. I don't know the exact date or the nature of that suffering, but I know that every act of selfishness and every refusal to love is a step toward destruction. Yet there is hope. Jesus sent me back because there is still a choice. That same love that built heaven is available to you right now, but you must choose it. Love cannot be forced or controlled. It must be received willingly. I took this message everywhere, to schools, to the streets, to anyone who would listen. I told them love isn't weakness and mercy isn't for the deserving. Every moment spent in hatred is a moment stolen from your destiny. Some scoffed, but others wept and changed. If only one heart is saved from the coming storm, it was worth the return. I plead with you, do not wait until it is too late. Do not waste another day thinking love is a luxury you can put off. You are running out of time. The world is running out of time. The kingdom is real and the choice is yours. Will you carry this love forward? This is our mission. Love one another as He has loved us.